Exodus 10. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials, so that I may perform these signs of mine among them, that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians, and how I performed my signs among them, and that you may know that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, "This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will bring locusts into your country tomorrow. They will cover the face of the ground so that it cannot be seen. They will devour what little you have left after the hail, including every tree that is growing in your fields. They will fill your houses and those of all your officials and all the Egyptians, something neither your parents nor your ancestors have ever seen from the day they settled in this land till now." Then Moses turned and left Pharaoh. Pharaoh's officials said to him, "How long will this man be a snare to us? Let the people go so that they may worship the Lord their God. Do you not yet realize that Egypt is ruined?" Then Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. "Go worship the Lord your God," he said, "but tell me who will be going." Moses answered, "We will go with our young and our old, with our sons and our daughters, and with our flocks and herds, because we are to celebrate a festival to the Lord." Pharaoh said, "The Lord be with you, if I let you go, along with your women and children. Clearly you are bent on evil. No, have only the men go and worship the Lord, since that's what you have been asking for." Then Moses and Aaron were driven out of Pharaoh's presence. And the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over Egypt, so that locusts swarm over the land and devour everything growing in the fields, everything left by the hail." So Moses stretched out his staff over Egypt, and the Lord made an east wind blow across the land all that day and all that night. By morning the wind had brought the locusts. They invaded all Egypt and settled down in every area of the country in great numbers. Never before had there been such a plague of locusts, nor will there ever be again. They covered all the ground until it was black. They devoured all that was left after the hail, everything growing in the fields and the fruit on the trees. Nothing green remained on tree or plant in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh quickly summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now forgive my sin once more, and pray to the Lord your God to take this deadly plague away from me." Moses then left Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord. And the Lord changed the wind to a very strong west wind, which caught up the locusts and carried them into the Red Sea. Not a locust was left anywhere in Egypt, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward the sky so that darkness spreads over Egypt, darkness that can be felt." So Moses stretched out his hand toward the sky, and total darkness covered all Egypt for 3 days. No one could see anyone else or move about for 3 days, yet all the Israelites had light in the places where they lived. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, "Go worship the Lord. Even your women and children may go with you. Only leave your flocks and herds behind." But Moses said, "You must allow us to have sacrifices and burnt offerings to present to the Lord our God. Our livestock, too, must go with us. Not a hoof is to be left behind. We have to use some of them in worshiping the Lord our God. And until we get there, we will not know what we are to use to worship the Lord." But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was not willing to let them go. Pharaoh said to Moses, "Get out of my sight. Make sure you do not appear before me again. The day you see my face, you will die." "Just as you say," Moses replied. "I will never appear before you again."
Okay, so that the reason is God says so that everyone will know that there's no one like me in all the earth. I'm unique, I'm powerful. Okay, so these are the reasons that God has given so far for the plagues. And tonight he gives yet another reason, a fourth reason. And the reason is in verse 2. Okay, that you may tell your children and grandchildren. Okay, so God says the reasons why I have done these miracles, these plagues, is because I want to show you who I am. I want to show you my power and uniqueness, and I want to show you that I'm present here in this land with all of you. And so that now you have a story to tell to your children and your grandchildren what I did here in Egypt. So, as I mentioned before, the Old Testament comes from a storytelling culture. People who teach by telling stories. So the whole Old Testament is actually a book of many, many stories. There are very few books and passages that are like the New Testament. The New Testament has a lot of principles. Do this, do that. If you do this, this will happen. If you don't do that, this will happen. These are principles. So that's the way the New Testament teaches. But the Old Testament teaches by telling a story. So I tell you a story. There was a farmer who was having a problem with monkeys. The monkeys came into the farm and messed up his farm, right? Picks plants, eats some of them, throws away the rest, and everything is in chaos. And he grows mainly peanuts. So he knows that the monkeys love peanuts. So he got himself a pot with a very narrow opening. He put a lot of peanuts in there. And so the monkeys came and they saw the peanuts, they went in and took up one, and they took out another one, and then one monkey decided, no, I'm not going to take one at a time, I'm going to take a whole lot. And then the monkey couldn't pull his hand out. And so the farmer came along and the monkey was gone. What does my story teach?
Don't be greedy.
Don't be greedy. You must let it go and you'll get what you want. If you grab too much, you will die. What other lessons do you learn? Don't be greedy. What else? Don't be too fat.
Why are you looking at me?
What other lessons do you learn from that?
No tubing.
What other lessons do you learn from that story?
I now know how to deal with monkeys.
Now I know how to deal with monkeys. Yeah, okay, that's another lesson you learn. Now I know how to catch monkeys. What other lessons do you learn?
Change your diet.
Change your diet. Monkeys love peanuts. Don't eat peanuts. You may get caught. Well, actually, when we tell stories, obviously, sometimes the stories will give a very clear principle, and maybe it's just one lesson. Don't be greedy. If I tell you another story, you may have a story that has many lessons in that one story. But stories are wonderful ways to teach. I've learned to teach using story because there's some people who will remember the story. So if I tell a story that's relevant to my lesson, they remember the story, they remember the lesson. Unfortunately, sometimes we tell stories and the story has nothing to do with the lesson. My wife had such an experience. She used to be a history teacher, and then she decided I'll teach the lesson like a story. So when the exams came, the students wrote stories. But some other teacher was marking it. And the other teacher is saying, where did this student learn this? So you have to tell stories that are relevant, and then the stories will teach a lesson. Now here is a story of how God changed the mind of Pharaoh. Pharaoh refused to release the slaves. Why should he? He's the most powerful man on earth. And he needs these people, they're cheap labor. In fact, they're free labor. So why would he want to release them? So God says, I will change Pharaoh's mind. God will make sure that Pharaoh will finally let the people go. And after this, you have a story to tell your children how God made a stubborn man change his mind. So here is a lesson. God wants the people of Israel, his people, to know who he is, to know that he is powerful, he can do all things, and now they will have a story to tell for generations and generations about the goodness of God, about how God loves them, about his power. So people love stories, and one of the problems with a modern mindset, especially in the West where science is very strong, or in places like China where science is like the only way you can learn things and everything else is not to be trusted. Now, we are very much influenced by something called the Enlightenment movement, 17th, 18th century, where we were taught that if something is objective, you can rely on it. You can test it and you can prove it, and then you can always depend on it. So science is like that. You test it, prove it, test it, prove it again. Okay, now I believe science. So it is objective knowledge. Subjective knowledge was very much distrusted by the Enlightenment movement. How do I know it's right? Because Solomon says so? No, I don't trust it. Can you prove it? No. He says Canada is cold. Is Canada cold? I asked Johnny. Johnny says, no, it's nice and warm. He's grown up in Canada. Ask Len, he says, what cold? What is cold? He's never learned anything but cold. So when Solomon says it's different, he's from Korea, can I trust him? He's not been in Canada before until now. So there's always this suspicion of subjective knowledge. I don't trust it. Right? So what has happened therefore is now we have this problem. When I say I know my wife, it is a knowledge that doesn't come from proof. I didn't put her in the laboratory and put in acid and then put it alkaline and then test tube, shake, and then, oh, I know my wife now. So the knowledge I have of my wife is from experiencing her these 32 years. It's an experience that's different from your experience. And I know her more than you, and maybe I know her differently from many of you, right? So the word know in Hebrew, which is the word yada, in Hebrew culture, yada is both knowledge from logic and reason, and maybe objective testing, and knowledge from experience. I have lived with this person, I know this person, I know what my wife likes to eat even before she says so. We go to a restaurant, sometimes she's, the menu is, there are 300 items, I cannot make a choice. You make a choice for me. And I choose something, ooh, I love this. How do I know my wife will love it? Out of 300 items on the menu. Because I know her. Okay? So I didn't read a book about her, by the way. Hasn't been written yet. No. So knowledge is both objective and subjective. And it is, I mentioned last week, it is both cognitive, which is in the head, and affective, which is from the heart. So we have to increasingly realize that knowledge is not just one dimension. So when God says, so that you will know me, it is not, well, we do read it in a book, so we know him from the book, but the real knowledge of God is knowledge from my heart. I have lived my life in a relationship with God, and I love it, and I tell about it. So we all have to learn how to tell stories about our lives, how God is so real in our lives. And that's why on Sunday I encourage different people to come forward and tell the testimonies. How did God change me? I was a person who did not believe in God. I was a person who actually lived my life thinking I was a Buddhist. I was raised up to be anti-Christian. My father tells me Christians are bad people. And so I loved my father and I wouldn't want to upset him, so I did not even consider the claims of Christianity. Not my business. There were 3 reasons why I decided that I wouldn't be a Christian. The first reason is it is a Western religion. The second reason is it is a religion for rich people, because everybody I knew who were Christians, they were rich. And thirdly, I know some Christians, and if they are Christians, I don't want to be a Christian. I don't want to be like them. Okay, they were bad people, and I don't want to be a bad person. So there were 3 reasons why I never considered being a Christian. But even as a young boy reading much, I read a lot of books and being taught about evolution in school, in science and so on, I used to think, I may not be very clever, but I don't think the whole world, which is so complex, comes about by chance. No, I don't think it's evolution. It's something else I don't understand, but I didn't care anyway. So I just said, there must be something out there that's not evolution. Maybe it's God, but I didn't care. So I grew up, I joined the army, and in the army they have this identity disc. In case you get shot, you die, and then you need to bury you. They look at your name, they look at your blood group. If you're injured, they give you right blood. And if you are dead, they say, okay, we give him a Buddhist funeral, because it says that Buddhist. And then one day at 21, my life had been smooth until I joined the army, and there were so many things I had that was wrong. I was angry, I was bitter, I was miserable. The army is not a nice place to work in. And at the bottom of my life, I tried to be good. You know, in Buddhism, you're told, live the narrow path, not good, not bad, just stay in the middle and do good things, do as much as you can, there's good karma, and you will escape, all the desires and delusions of this world. So that's what I believed in. But it didn't change my life. It didn't do anything to me, and I was just getting more and more bitter and angry. And one day I just said to, I was in my room, I said, God, if you are there, if you are real, you've got to show yourself to me. Tell me who you are. Are you Buddha? Are you Krishna? Are you Allah? There's so many gods out there. And if you are Jesus Christ, why don't you prove yourself to me? Prove yourself to me and I will believe you. So, of course, I try different gods, right? I need God. I say my life is just messed up. And I pray to Buddha, no, nothing happened. I pray to any other god. In my prayers, nothing happened. And then when I started praying to Jesus, things started happening. And at first I said, coincidence. And then, another coincidence. How nice, another coincidence. Until one fine day I just realized, I think I have had too many coincidences. I think Jesus is real. And there, that day, 1975, I said, Jesus, you are real. I believe you. But it wasn't due to anybody telling me about Jesus. It wasn't due to anybody explaining to me the Bible and all that. So I had no idea. I just knew. I said, if you are real, show yourself to me, and he did. But 2 years later, here I am in the same job in the army, still bitter, but less bitter now, less miserable. Something changed in me. I was more calm, not so angry. I was not so, hot-tempered. And I knew something was changing inside me. And then one day while walking around my camp, I heard somebody say to me, you are a Christian now. Why aren't you going to church? And I know it's not me telling myself, why don't you go to church? Why would I want to go to church? Sunday I like to sleep in and watch TV and play football. Why would I want to go to church? And then, so I said, I knew this has to be God. So I said, God, if you want me to go to church, you have to show me. Because I've tried to go to church myself, and there was this church I went to, and I didn't like the pastor. His message was nonsense. I went to this church, the people don't like me. And so on, I gave all the excuses. I said, God, if you can show me a church where it's a nice environment, the pastor speaks good sense, and people there are nice, I will stay. So that was May 1977. A few weeks later, one of my officers came to me and said, Sir, I'm getting married. Would you come to my wedding? Of course, it's my officer's wedding. I go. So, okay, where's your wedding? Oh, he's a Christian. Oh, Christian wedding. Okay, good. So I went to the church. It wasn't his church. He comes from a small house church. So he didn't have a church big enough to marry. He borrowed a church. So I went to that church he borrowed, and they had a nice message from the pastor. I said, nice man, very sensible message. And there's nice environment, air conditioned, and oh yeah, I like it. It's hot in Singapore. And then after the wedding, I went home and I forgot everything. May, June, July. August, another officer in my camp came to me and said, Sikap, would you like to come to my church? And I wanted to say, no, what for? Then I realized, hey, God is sending me somebody to show me where to go. So, okay, give me your address. So he wrote down the address and I look at it and same church. The same church that my other officer, not his church, he went to the wedding, and that church was the same as this officer's church. So that Sunday, the next Sunday, I went and I stayed, and I was baptized 1 year later in that church. God showed me how real He was. And so I started going to church, I started to grow, I started to read the Bible, and as they say in Canada, the rest is history. So that's my story of how God made Himself real to me. Just one small part. And I do tell stories like that because I want people to see that God is very real in my life. Maybe you can try it. You can test it for yourself. Say your own prayer. Say the prayer that you want to pray. But God will answer your prayer because you're seriously, honestly seeking Him. Okay? I won't tell more, but those of you interested, I've got a little booklet. You can pick it up afterwards, and it's got my story in greater detail. So, we are to tell stories of how God has been real to us as parents, as friends, as brothers and sisters. Now, how do you tell your story? Now, in Silicon Valley, California, you go to California to make money, right? And you have this great idea, I want to start up a business. So you go to California to look for people to finance your job, your idea. So in California, they have something called an elevator pitch. Yeah, business school now teaches you elevator pitch. What's an elevator pitch? You have this great idea. It will change the world. It's a small little phone that you can swipe and then the picture goes up. You swipe down, the picture comes down. There is no such phone yet. Now, I need the money to develop this. And one day, I'm in this building, and I press the elevator, and the door opens, and there inside the elevator is Bill Gates. So I walk in. Mr. Gates, how are you? Good morning. I have something to sell you. And I would like you to invest. You do not know how many stories that Mr. Gates will be taking up. Maybe one story, maybe 10. In the time that you are in the elevator with Mr. Bill Gates, you want to convince him that he you should invest in your company. So that's called the elevator pitch. A pitch is a sales talk. So elevator pitch is very short. In the 2 minutes or 5 minutes that you are in the same elevator with Mr. Bill Gates, you want to convince him to put money in your business. So all of us Christians should learn to develop an elevator pitch. 3 minutes, 5 minutes to tell somebody the story of my life. I was a non-Christian, this is my life. This is how it was like, and it was messed up. And I decided my life needed to end there and start differently. Where do I go? And this is what somebody said to me, or this is what happened to me. In my case, I asked God, where are you? Who are you? And then something changed. And the rest of my life is different. So before, during, after, that's the story of my life. So how do you tell a story? In 3 minutes, sometimes the first time you may have to write it down and try and memorize it. But as you get familiar with it, you can tell it just out of your head. Now remember, it is not something that can be proven by a scientific laboratory. So it is an experience you have experienced. And it is something that is real, which you can offer. So it's like this. I have a craving for Singapore food. Here in Toronto, I do not know where. So I asked Linda, and Linda says, oh, I have this restaurant I tried, and it's pretty good. Now, so she tells me the address, and I go. I may like it, I may not like it. But because she's my friend, she would be very selfish if she doesn't tell me the address. So that's how and why we tell our stories.